The china plates felt cool against my fingertips as I arranged them carefully around my parents' mahogany dining table. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear Mom's voice carrying that particular tone, the one she reserved for explaining away disappointments. "Yes, Rebecca's here," Mom said into her phone, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper but carried perfectly into the dining room. "She's between opportunities right now. You know how the job market is these days." I set down the last plate and moved to the silverware drawer, letting the familiar rhythm of preparation calm the tightness in my chest. The annual Chin family reunion. 3 years ago I'd dreaded it. 2 years ago I'd almost skipped it. This year I'd accepted the inevitable with something close to peace. "Between jobs." That was Aunt Linda's voice, sharp with curiosity. Still, wasn't she between jobs last year too? "It's complicated," Mom said, her discomfort palpable even from the next room. "The economy, you know. She's very particular about what she wants to do." I folded napkins into neat triangles, muscle memory from 1,000 family dinners taking over. Let them think what they wanted. The truth was so far beyond their understanding that explanation felt pointless. My sister Jessica breezed through the front door in a cloud of expensive perfume and designer confidence. Her heels clicked against the hardwood with the assured rhythm of someone who'd never questioned their place in the world. "Is she actually helping?" Jessica asked, not bothering to lower her voice. "Or just pretending to be useful?" "Jessica, please," Mom said, but there was no real reproach in it. I emerged from the dining room with a stack of serving bowls. Jessica looked me up and down, taking in my simple jeans and unmarked sweater with barely concealed disdain. "Still dressing like you shop at thrift stores, I see," she said, examining her manicured nails. "Some things never change." "Some things don't need to," I replied evenly, moving past her toward the kitchen. "That's the spirit of a chronic underachiever right there," Jessica called after me. "Just accept mediocrity and call it authenticity." Dad appeared from his study, already in his reunion mode, jovial, expansive, ready to show off his successful family to the assembled relatives. His smile faltered slightly when he saw me. "Rebecca. Good you're here early." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Listen, when people ask what you're doing these days, maybe just say you're consulting. It sounds better than nothing." "I'm not doing nothing, Dad." Right. Your little projects." He waved his hand dismissively. "But to people who don't understand, it might sound like unemployment. We don't want them to worry." "Worry about what?" "About you." He said it gently, the way you'd speak to someone who couldn't grasp simple concepts. "About whether you're okay. Whether we failed as parents somehow." Jessica laughed from the living room. Too late for that question. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the first relatives. Within 30 minutes, the house filled with the Chun clan, aunts, uncles, cousins, and the extended network of family friends who'd known me since childhood. Each arrival brought the same pattern. Warm greetings, catching up, and then the inevitable question. "So Rebecca, what are you up to these days?" And each time before I could answer, someone else would jump in. "She's taking some time to figure things out," Mom would say. "Still exploring her options," Dad would add. "Between opportunities" became the recurring euphemism. I watched Jessica work the room like a campaign event, her recent promotion to senior marketing director at a major firm serving as her conversation centerpiece. She'd position herself near me deliberately, creating contrast. "It's such a demanding role," Jessica was telling Uncle Robert and Aunt Mary. "But seeing campaigns go national, having that kind of impact, it's worth the 70-hour weeks." She glanced at me. "Though I suppose not everyone's cut out for that kind of pressure." "Rebecca always was more low-key," Uncle Robert said diplomatically. "That's one word for it," Jessica murmured, just loud enough. "Cousin David joined our cluster, fresh from closing a major real estate deal. The thing about success," he announced, "is that you have to be willing to take risks. Too many people play it safe and wonder why nothing happens." "Exactly," Jessica agreed. "Some people are just afraid of real responsibility." I excused myself to check on the food, ignoring Jessica's triumphant smile. In the kitchen, I found Aunt Linda and Mom in deep conversation. "Have you thought about suggesting something concrete?" Aunt Linda was saying. "Even just part-time retail to start? It would give her structure." "We've tried," Mom said wearily. "She just talks about her work, but nothing ever seems to come of it." I think she might be depressed. Oh, honey. Aunt Linda touched Mom's arm sympathetically. That's so hard. Has she seen someone? She won't admit there's a problem. I cleared my throat and they both jumped slightly. The pity in their eyes was worse than Jessica's contempt. Rebecca. We were just discussing my apparent psychological crisis. I finished, opening the oven to check the roast. I heard. We're worried about you, Mom said, her voice catching. It's been 3 years since you left that job and you're not. Not what you expected, I supplied. I know. Back in the living room, the reunion was in full swing. Jessica had gathered an audience for what was clearly going to be another performance. The thing is, she was saying, in my position I network with incredible people. Just last week I had lunch with a Forbes 30 Under 30 recipient. Now that's the kind of company successful people keep. Jessica's always been ambitious, Aunt Mary said proudly. Not everyone has that drive. Some people are followers, some are leaders, Cousin David added. Nothing wrong with being ordinary. I sat down on the periphery of the group, content to let the conversation flow around me. Let them have this. What did it cost me really to be their cautionary tale? Where's Rebecca working now? This from Uncle James, who'd just arrived. The room went quiet for a beat. Jessica's smile turned sharp. Rebecca's on a bit of a sabbatical, Dad said carefully, taking time to reassess her goals. For 3 years. Uncle James looked genuinely concerned. Some people are late bloomers, Jessica said sweetly. Though at 32, you do have to wonder when the blooming starts. Laughter rippled through the group, not quite cruel but not quite kind either. At least she helps with family events, Mom said, trying to find something positive. She's very good at setting tables. More laughter, gentler this time but somehow worse for its sympathy. Cousin David leaned back in his chair, warming to the topic. You know what Rebecca's problem is? No vision. Success requires seeing the big picture, taking strategic risks. Some people just think too small. Or don't think about career at all, Jessica added. Some people are content just existing. Nothing wrong with simple living, Aunt Linda offered, but it sounded like consolation for a terminal diagnosis. The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. I was the official family failure, the cautionary tale, the proof that potential didn't guarantee results. They'd assigned me that role and nothing I could say would change the narrative they'd constructed. Dinner was announced and we all migrated to the dining room, the same room where I'd laid out those plates hours ago. I ended up seated between Aunt Mary and Uncle Robert, both of whom treated me with the careful kindness reserved for the fragile. So Rebecca, Uncle Robert said as we passed dishes, what do you do with your time these days? Hobbies? Interests? I work actually. Jessica snorted from across the table. On what? Your imaginary projects. I consult, I said simply. Consult. Jessica drew out the word mockingly. On what exactly? How to avoid employment. Jessica, Dad said, but his tone lacked conviction. No, I'm serious, Jessica continued. If Rebecca's working, why does she never talk about it? Why are there no business cards, no website, no evidence of this mysterious career? Some work doesn't require flashy marketing, I said quietly. Convenient excuse. Jessica turned to the table at large. Isn't that what all unemployed people say? That they're consulting or between opportunities? It's code for I gave up. That seems harsh, Aunt Mary said, but she was looking at me with that pitying expression again. Is it harsh to tell the truth? Jessica shot back. Look, I love my sister. But at some point we have to stop enabling this fantasy that she's got some secret successful life. She's unemployed. She has been for years. And the longer we all pretend otherwise, the longer she stays stuck. The table went silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for a defense, a breakdown, something. I took a sip of water. May I have the potatoes, please? Jessica threw up her hands. See? This is what I mean. No ambition. No fight. No nothing. Dad changed the subject to Uncle James's new boat, and dinner proceeded with forced normalcy. But I'd been categorized now, officially filed under family concern with a side of disappointing child. After dinner, while I was clearing plates, I overheard Cousin David talking to a group in the living room. The economy's tough, sure, he was saying, but winners find a way. They network, they hustle, they make things happen. The people who fail are the ones who give up and make excuses. Rebecca's not even making excuses anymore, Jessica added. She's just accepted being a loser. Don't use that word, Mom said but weakly. What word should I use? Underachiever? Unmotivated? Face it, Mom. Some kids just don't turn out the way you hope. I loaded the dishwasher methodically, letting the voices fade to background noise. They needed this narrative. Jessica needed to be the successful daughter. My parents needed to explain away their confusion about me. The extended family needed a cautionary tale for their own children. What they didn't need was the truth. Aunt Mary found me in the kitchen, her face creased with concern. Rebecca, honey, can we talk? Of course. I want you to know that we don't judge you. Family is family, successful or not. I appreciate that. But I do worry. She took my hand. You're so isolated. No career, no social life that we can see. It's not healthy. Have you thought about talking to someone? There are therapists who specialize in... I'm fine, Aunt Mary. Really? But you're not, sweetie. You're not fine. You're alone and unemployed and hiding from the world. Her eyes welled with tears. We just want to help you. Before I could respond, Aunt Linda rushed into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement. Turn on the TV, she practically shouted. Living room now. Everyone. The urgency in her voice pulled us all toward the living room. Uncle James already had the TV on, flipping through channels until he landed on CNN. The familiar news desk came into view and then... my face. Not a small photo. A full-screen image of me standing in front of the United Nations building, flanked by world leaders and humanitarian organization heads. Unprecedented achievement, the anchor was saying. At just 32 years old, Dr. Rebecca Chin has revolutionized global health infrastructure in developing nations, creating sustainable systems that have provided clean water and medical access to over 50 million people across 3 continents. The room went completely silent. The screen shifted to footage I recognized from 6 months ago. The opening of the water treatment facility in sub-Saharan Africa that had taken 2 years to develop and implement. Her innovative approach, the anchor continued, combines advanced filtration technology with community-driven maintenance programs, ensuring long-term sustainability without creating dependency on foreign aid. Another image flashed up, me shaking hands with the Secretary General of the UN. Dr. Chen's work has been praised by the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and numerous international development agencies. Her foundation, operating on what she calls radical transparency, publishes all financial data and outcome metrics publicly, setting a new standard for nonprofit accountability. Jessica made a small, strangled sound. The anchor smiled directly at the camera. And today, Time magazine has named Dr. Rebecca Chin their Person of the Year, citing her transformative impact on global health equity and her revolutionary model for effective humanitarian work. The screen filled with the cover. My face, professional and composed, under the banner, The Changemaker, How One Woman Revolutionized Global Health. Uncle Robert found his voice first. That's you. I nodded calmly, still holding the plate I'd been about to take to the kitchen. Dr. Chin joins a prestigious list, the anchor was saying, including world leaders, innovators, and activists. But what makes her selection particularly notable is the scope and measurability of her impact. Unlike many humanitarian efforts, Dr. Chen's work has demonstrable, trackable outcomes that have transformed millions of lives. The segment shifted to an interview clip, one I'd done reluctantly at the magazine's insistence. I don't do this for recognition, my TV self was saying. I do it because clean water and basic medical care shouldn't be privileges. They're rights. And we have the technology and resources to provide them. We just need to be willing to actually solve problems instead of managing them. Some have criticized your approach as too radical, the interviewer prompted. Good, TV me replied. If everyone's comfortable with your methods, you're probably not solving the real problem. Back in the living room, the news had moved on, but no one moved to change the channel. Your Person of the Year, Mom whispered. Time magazine Person of the Year. It's just a title, I said, setting down the plate. Dad couldn't finish the sentence. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, typing frantically. There are dozens of articles. The New York Times, Washington Post, BBC, They're all covering this. Oh my God, Aunt Linda breathed. Rebecca, why didn't you say something? You never asked what I actually did, I replied simply. You asked if I had a job. Different question. Jessica's face had gone pale. You've been, all this time? Working, yes. Consulting, as I mentioned. I consult with governments, NGOs, and international organizations on sustainable infrastructure development. Cousin David scrolled through his phone, his expression growing more stunned by the second. You have a doctorate from MIT. A master's in public health from Johns Hopkins. You've published 17 papers in peer-reviewed journals on water sanitation and disease prevention. 18, I corrected gently. The newest one came out last month. You've given TED Talks, Aunt Mary said, staring at her own phone. Multiple TED Talks. With millions of views. Those were for fundraising primarily. The foundation needs visibility to attract donors and partners. Uncle James looked up from a tablet. Your foundation's annual budget is larger than some small country's GDP. We try to use resources efficiently. Mom was crying now, though I wasn't sure if it was from pride or shock or embarrassment. Rebecca, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? I tried, Mom. You weren't interested in the details. You just wanted to know if I had a real job. But Person of the Year is a recognition of work that was already done, I said. The work matters more than the award. Jessica finally found her voice. Tonight I called you. I said you were unemployed, a loser, unmotivated. Yes, I heard. Her face crumpled. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You thought I was exactly what I appeared to be from your limited perspective, I finished. It's fine. You weren't wrong to think what you thought given the information you chose to see. But we should have asked, Dad said, his voice hollow. We should have listened. Perhaps. I picked up the plate again. But I wasn't doing this for your approval. I was doing it because 50 million people needed clean water more than I needed you to understand my career choices. The TV had moved on to other news, but phones were buzzing all around the room as relatives discovered articles, videos, interviews, years of work that had been publicly documented for anyone who cared to look. Forbes ranked you as one of the top 50 philanthropists under 40, Uncle Robert read aloud. They estimate your foundation's impact at over $3 billion in economic development. The multiplier effect of health infrastructure is significant, I acknowledged. Aunt Linda was scrolling through photos on her tablet. You've met with presidents, prime ministers. Is that you with the Dalai Lama? He came to one of our facility openings in India. Very kind man. Jessica sat down heavily, her phone clutched in her hand. I told everyone you were a failure. I made you the family joke. And you're Person of the Year. Those two things aren't connected, I said. What you thought of me doesn't change the work. What the magazine thinks of me doesn't change the work either. The work exists separately from everyone's opinions about it. But I was so cruel, Jessica whispered. You were operating on incomplete information and your own insecurities, I replied. People do that. Mom approached me tentatively as if I'd become a stranger. Why didn't you correct us? All those times we introduced you as unemployed, all those pitying looks. Why did you let us think that? Because correcting you would have required explaining, and explaining would have required time and energy I preferred to spend on actual work. Your assumptions about my life didn't affect my life. They only affected your understanding of it. All this time, Dad said wonderingly, you've been one of the most influential people in global health and we thought you were unemployed. I was never unemployed. I left corporate consulting to start the foundation. That was always the plan. But you never told us the plan. I tried, Dad. 3 years ago when I gave notice I told you I was starting a humanitarian organization focused on infrastructure. You said I was throwing away my career. Mom cried for a week. Jessica told me I was being naive and stupid. I met their eyes calmly. So I stopped explaining. I just did the work. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the continued buzzing of phones as more relatives discovered the news. Cousin David cleared his throat. I said some things tonight. About success and taking risks and... You weren't wrong, I interrupted. Success does require risk. I risked everything. My savings, my reputation, relationships with people who couldn't understand the choice. Those were strategic risks based on careful assessment. You were right about that principle even if you misapplied it to me. I called you ordinary, he said quietly. Maybe I am. 50 million people have clean water not because I'm extraordinary, but because the solution was straightforward. We just needed someone willing to implement it without getting distracted by ego or politics. Uncle James was still reading articles. They're saying you'll probably win the Nobel Peace Prize next year. Multiple experts have mentioned you as the front runner. Awards committees make their own decisions, I said. I can't control that. Can't control, Jessica laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. Rebecca, you're going to win a Nobel Prize and you're acting like it's no big deal. It's a big deal to the Nobel Committee. To me, it's a distraction from the work. I gestured around the room. Like this. This whole evening has been about your perception of success versus reality. But the reality is the same whether you understand it or not. 50 million people had their lives improved. That happened regardless of what you thought of me. But we should have known, Mom insisted, tears streaming freely now. We're your family. We should have supported you. You supported the version of me you could understand, I replied. I don't fault you for that. Understanding requires interest and effort. And you weren't interested in the details of international development work. You wanted me to have a recognizable career. When I didn't, you categorized me as failed and moved on. Aunt Mary was crying too now. I told you to get therapy. I said you were depressed and hiding from the world. I am hiding from the world, I agreed. From this world where success is measured by job titles and social media presence. I prefer the world where success is measured by water quality tests and infant mortality rates. The front door opened and more relatives arrived, late arrivals who hadn't been there for dinner. Aunt Linda immediately thrust her phone at them. Look, Rebecca's Person of the Year. The new arrivals went through their own version of shock and disbelief, pulling up articles and videos, trying to reconcile the quiet woman in jeans with the global humanitarian leader on their screens. Uncle Chin, the family patriarch, arrived last. At 83, he'd seen generations of family drama with philosophical detachment. He looked at me, then at the assembled relatives with their phones, then at the TV still displaying news coverage. Let me guess, he said dryly. You all spent the evening telling Rebecca she was a failure, and now you've discovered she's more successful than everyone here combined? Uncle Chin, Dad started. Don't. The old man waved his hand dismissively. I saw this coming 3 years ago. Rebecca has her grandmother's eyes. That woman rebuilt a village after the war with nothing but determination and intelligence. I knew Rebecca would do something similar. He approached me, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Person of the Year. Your grandmother would be proud. Thank you, Uncle Chin. Though I suspect you don't care much about the title. The title helps with fundraising, I admitted. Donors like supporting award-winning organizations. So in that sense it's useful. He laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Always practical. Yes, very much like your grandmother. He turned to the room at large. You want to know why you didn't see this? Because you were looking at Rebecca and seeing your own definitions of success. You wanted her to fit your understanding of achievement. She refused to shrink herself to match your limited vision. We just wanted her to be happy. Mom protested weakly. She is happy, Uncle Chin replied. She's just happy doing things you didn't value enough to notice. Jessica had been silent for several minutes, scrolling through article after article. There are profiles of you in every major publication. Forbes, Fortune, The Economist. They all call you a visionary. They call me what serves their narrative, I said. I'm not a visionary. I'm a problem solver who happened to solve a big problem. You've been invited to speak at the World Economic Forum, Cousin David read. You turned them down. 4 times, I confirmed. Those conferences are where people talk about solving problems. I prefer to spend that time actually solving them. Aunt Linda approached tentatively. Rebecca, I need to apologize. I was so condescending, so presumptuous. You were concerned, I interrupted. Misguided but concerned. I don't hold it against you. But I treated you like a charity case. You are a case for charity, Uncle Chin interjected. Just not the kind you thought. Rebecca showed you charity by not embarrassing you with the truth until you forced the issue. The evening devolved into a strange reception where relatives who'd pitted me hours ago now tried to process their whiplash. Some apologized profusely. Others tried to claim they'd always known I was destined for greatness. A few, like Uncle Chin, simply accepted the revelation and moved forward. Jessica cornered me in the kitchen while I was finally washing those dishes. "I don't know what to say," she began. "Then don't say anything," I suggested gently. "I built my entire identity around being the successful daughter. And it turns out I'm not even close to your level. We're not in competition, Jessica. Aren't we? Wasn't that the whole point of tonight? You letting me mock you, letting everyone pity you, and then revealing your person of the fucking year." "The point of tonight," I said carefully, "was having dinner with family. The time announcement happened to coincide with the reunion. I didn't plan some dramatic reveal. But you could have told us before. You could have prevented all of this." "Prevented what? You being honest about your opinions? Everyone revealing how they really saw me." I dried a plate slowly. "This wasn't punishment, Jessica. This was just reality. You thought I was a failure because that's what you needed to think to feel successful. The magazine naming me Person of the Year doesn't change who I've been for the last 3 years. It just changes your perception." He was crying now, makeup running. "I'm so ashamed." "Don't be. Be curious instead." I handed her a dish towel. "Be curious about why you needed me to be less than you. Be curious about what success actually means beyond titles and salaries. Be curious about what you might be missing when you judge people by surface appearances. How are you so calm about this?" "Because I knew who I was before tonight and I'll know who I am tomorrow. External validation doesn't change that." I glanced at her. "Does it change you?" He thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe it should." Later, as the reunion was winding down, various relatives approached with requests. Could I get them into exclusive events, introduce them to important people, help with their causes? I deflected politely, offering foundation contacts for legitimate charitable interests but maintaining firm boundaries. Mom found me putting on my coat to leave. "Don't go yet," she pleaded. "We need to talk about this properly. We just did for 3 hours. But I still don't understand. Why hide this from us?" "I didn't hide it, Mom. It was all public information. Multiple articles, speeches, the foundation website. It was all there for anyone who wanted to look. You just never looked because you'd already decided what my story was." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair," I said, not unkindly. "You wanted me to have a conventional career you could brag about to relatives. When I chose differently, you stopped listening. You're not unusual in that. Most people do the same thing." Dad joined us in the foyer. "What happens now?" "Now I go home, prep for tomorrow's video conference with the Kenyan Health Ministry and continue my work. Same as always." "But everything's changed," he insisted. "Nothing has changed except your awareness. The work was happening before tonight. It'll happen after tonight. Your understanding of it is irrelevant to its existence." "That's harsh, Rebecca." "It's honest." I opened the door. "You're my family and I love you. But I can't live my life seeking your approval or fearing your judgment. I tried that for years and it was exhausting. So I stopped. I chose the work over your comfort. That was the right choice for me and for the 50 million people who benefited from it." "When can we see you again?" Mom asked, her voice small. "Next reunion probably. Unless there's a birthday or holiday. But we want to be part of your life." "You are part of my life," I said gently. "You're just not the center of it. The work is the center. You can either accept that and engage with who I actually am, or you can continue to be disappointed that I'm not who you wanted me to be. Either way, I'll still love you and I'll still do the work." I left them in the doorway, looking smaller somehow than they had at the start of the evening. Uncle Chin caught me at my car. "You handled that well," he said. "Did I? I feel like I broke something tonight." "You broke their comfortable illusions. That needed breaking." He patted my shoulder. "Your grandmother used to say, the people who love you for who they think you are will struggle when they meet who you actually are. Tonight they met you. Give them time to adjust. And if they don't adjust, then you continue being who you are and they continue being who they are and you love each other from that honest distance." He smiled. "It's not ideal but it's real. And real is better than pretend." I drove home through quiet streets, my phone buzzing periodically with messages from relatives. Some apologetic, some congratulatory, some confused. I'd answer them eventually in my own time, with the same patient honesty I'd shown tonight. The work would continue. It always did. Tomorrow there would be meetings about the sanitation project in Bangladesh, grant applications for the medical access program in rural India, and follow-up data from the water systems in Ethiopia. None of that changed based on magazine covers or family opinions. But tonight had clarified something I'd suspected for years. Validation from others was irrelevant to doing meaningful work. Whether my family understood or approved, whether magazines awarded titles or critics dismissed efforts, the work existed independently of all that noise. 50 million people had clean water because I'd chosen to solve a problem rather than manage perceptions. That would remain true whether Time magazine named me Person of the Year or whether my family thought I was unemployed. The work was the point. It always had been. Everything else was just commentary.